404, this is 7, stand by a minute. Just come on, what is your attack angle?
Okay, talk to him, see what that did. Charlie Horse, 88.
24, traffic 275.
85 just made a pass in there. Can you give us any?
Go to 21, 77.
Standing by, over.
Okay, I'll put it a little closer than those trees. Let me come around with a Lao 3 and I'll put it on those trees there.
Roger that, Lao 3.
Okay, I'm Captain Richard E. Diller, D-I-L-L-E-R. E stands for Edward. I was a captain in the Air Force at the time that I was flying A-1s, and I got out of the Air Force as a captain. I did not stay in as a career. I was in for 6 years, 8.5 months on active duty, and I flew for 5 years, the last 5 years.
Fantastic. Now, and as I was saying, since I am the, hold on. Doesn't make any sense. Did I just lose another card? Which, yeah. Since I'm the least knowledgeable on Boxer 2-2, can you fill me in on what your role was in the mission where you were brought into play? I think you said you were on the second day, or were you involved first day, second day, third day?
Let me tell you about the first day. I was in the morning. I was assigned to check out two guys in the A-1. They were George Luck was the name of one of them, Captain George Luck. He was an Air Force Academy graduate. They had been A-26 squadron pilots, and the reason that they were going to check out in-country in A-1 was because George Luck was a safety officer, and they didn't have a safety officer at the base at NKP, and the other officer was the squadron commander at A-26 squadron, and he had flown in World War II and in Korea. And so I was up flying with George Luck that morning of Boxer 2-2, and I don't remember exactly the time of the shoot down, but it was somewhere early in the morning around 8 o'clock or so. And we got a call from the command post, and they requested that we land immediately because our airplane was going to be needed for support because it was in a bad area. And they knew there was a big fight coming up for the rescue of the crew members. Both of them had survived the ejection, and we were going to have to go over there and get them out of there. I didn't fly the first day because I had already flown as an instructor pilot for George Luck, and so I didn't fly until the second day. Do you want me to just go on?
If you could, please.
Okay. On the second day, things got all cranked up, and I was assigned to go out with Captain or First Lieutenant Rex Huntsman, and Rex and I went out there a little later after the main force had gone out to try to rescue the survivor. And at this time, we knew that the front seater, Boxer 2-2 Alpha, Ben Danielson, had been killed, and so we were just looking for the back seater. Woody Bergeron, I think he was the first lieutenant at the time. And so Rex and I went out there and we listened to what was going on, and they brought the helicopters up the river at low altitude to try to pick up the survivor, but the helicopter was hovering, and it turned out that the aircraft commander on the helicopter thought he was getting ground fire, and he pulled out. As it turned out, as I understand it, his tail rotor got entangled in some trees, and he thought he was getting ground fire, getting hit from ground fire, so he pulled out. And Woody was on the ground there, and he said, "I was 5 feet from the rescue, from 5 feet from the hoist. Why did he leave? Why did he leave?" And we were just brokenhearted because we were so close to getting him out of there. This is on the second morning, actually around noontime. Well, at that time, then the rescue forces needed to go back to the base to get fuel and to get rearmament and to get new crews. Not all of them, but there were a lot of them that had to go back. And so Rex and I were fresh out there. And so our job was assigned to keep the bad guys busy while the rescue forces were out getting rearmed and ready to go. So we had to fly around. We knew where he was along the river there, and so we just flew pipping out one CBU at a time, trying to keep the bad guys busy while we were, as long as we could. And so we were out there for quite some time. Rex and I were pretty low. We were around 100 feet. Now, be aware that we were only just a few miles from the Ho Chi Minh Trail. Actually, we were on the Ho Chi Minh Trail and just a few miles from Magia Pass, which was a hot spot on the trail. And so the bad guys had a lot of armament there. They had a lot of guns, and they had a lot of big guns, 23 millimeters, 37 millimeters, and small arms fire. And Rex and I were at low altitude, around 100 feet, I would estimate, but I don't remember that for sure, but somewhere in that area. And we were just trying to keep the bad guys away from the survivor. Interestingly, neither Rex nor I saw any secondary explosions. We never saw any. I'll take that back. We did see a secondary explosion, but we did not see any ground fire, which really surprised me because the enemy was all around the whole area there, and they were well armed. At least we thought they were well armed, but we just flew around in the area, and pretty soon they said, well, the rescue forces had rearmed and they were coming back with their airplanes, and we were free to exit the area. So Rex and I headed back to the base, and that was the end of my experience on the second day. The third day, well, what happened was we got pretty discouraged. Jim George was my roommate, and we got pretty discouraged about the survival of the person on the ground there, Woody's survival at the time. We didn't know his name at the time, but we were very discouraged. And at 3 o'clock in the morning, they beat on the door and they said, he's still alive down there. We're going to have a briefing here in about an hour and a half. Get ready and come over to the command post. So Jim and I came straight up out of our beds because it was the most exciting thing we'd heard since the day before. And by the way, they'd had many attempts come up the river, many times a helicopter to come up the river. There are other people who have better records of that than I do, but they tried to pick up the survivor over and over, and they couldn't because of the intense ground fire there. And the helicopters can't hover. They have to hover to rescue a survivor, and they can't hover if they're getting a lot of ground fire. So they had to get out of the area, and so that's the reason that the survivor was still on the ground. Well, Jim and I came straight out of our bed, and we got over to the command post and got the briefing going on. And what they did was they set up 2 daisy chains, what we call daisy chains, and that was a flight of 8 A-1s on one side of the river and another flight of A-1s on the other side of the river, and we're going to fly in circular pattern around there. And we had Willie Pete, which is white phosphorus, for smoke to obscure the vision of the gunners, and we had gas, incapacitating gas to keep the gunners from being able to function, and CBUs and all kinds of things that we were working on. Well, what happened was that I had a mechanical problem. I had to go back to the ramp, and another guy, Dave Freestad, who's a captain, had gone back to the ramp too. So we got our airplanes fixed, and Dave and I got out there, and I was designated to be the leader of the flight of the two of us, between Dave Freestad and myself. We got out there, and I checked in with the on-scene commander, who is Major Tom Dayton. And I said, we're here, we're ready to join the fight. And he said, well, we got 6 A-1s on one side of the river and 8 A-1s on the other side of the river. We were to have been the other two to fill in on the first side of the river. And he said, I want you to go up to 10,000 feet and hold. And he said, if we need you, we know where you are. And so I had the presence of mind to take my camera with me that day. It was a beautiful day. The sun was shining, and it was probably 65 degrees. And we could see all the way over to almost to the Gulf of Tonkin, across the isthmus of, not the isthmus, but across the
TMT?
The North Vietnam, all the way across over there. And it got a beautiful view of Magia Pass and the bombs that had exploded on the ground in the area. And so when they started with the pickup, what they did was they started with the helicopter coming up the river from the south, and First Lieutenant or Captain Jack Hudson was escorting the helicopters, Jack was telling him, he was talking on the radio. I heard him talking to him, and he said, "Okay, Sandy, keep coming, keep coming, keep coming." He said, "Oh, you overshot the survivor. You got to turn around and go back, Sandy." Or Jolly, he said. So he went back, and meanwhile, I got my camera going, and I started taking pictures. And I got a beautiful picture of McGill Pass, and I got several pictures of the actual pickup of Boxer 22 Bravo. And they made the helicopter made the pickup, and pretty soon they said, "We got him aboard." And that was my cue to get the heck out of there and get on the ground, because I knew there was going to be a traffic jam because there were so many missions that had been flown out of the base. And so I said to Dave, let's go, let's head on back. So we head on back to the base, and we landed and beat the crowd in there. So that was my very modest contribution to Boxer 22 rescue. But that was the cards that I was dealt, and that was the way that it went for me. So when Woody got off the airplane, I saw him. He had a little scratch on his forehead there, and but other than that, he was not injured at all. And he might tell you this, but I heard the debriefing that he said that the worst time for him was when in the evenings, when everybody went home, but it wasn't completely dark yet. He said the bad guys didn't have any cameras, but they came down to the river where he was, and they found where he was, and he had already moved up the river. He had jettisoned his parachute and left it where it was, but he took his radio and his survival gear and his vest. He moved up the river, and he said he watched them work over the area where he had been. He had a little indentation in the reeds along the river, and he said they shot an AK-47 in there, and they also had a canister of gas, and they threw that in that hadn't exploded from the A-1s, and he threw that in there, and they threw that in there, and it turned out that he said I was about 60 yards up the river watching them. He said if they'd have turned around, they'd have seen me, but they didn't turn around, they didn't see him. So he also had a canteen, and he had the presence of mind that when he got off the helicopter, he gave the canteen to the flight surgeon. He said, "Here, analyze this. I've been drinking this water. I want to know what kind of bugs I got." And so that's the kind of a survivor that you have to have, somebody who will have a presence of mind to help himself to do the best that he can to help himself to survive in a situation like that, because it's not everybody's fault or anybody's responsibility. You know, we're all in it together. And as it turned out, Boxer 22 Alpha was a victim of the system, and it just happened that it was not able to rescue him when we needed to. So that's, as I said, my very modest contribution to Boxer 22 survivor.
Well, I'll say you may have felt a modest contribution to Bravo, but you had a big contribution to Alpha, because for 38 years that we'd known nothing, never had a location, but getting that picture and seeing that red dot was pretty important to me. It was important to my mom as well. So the way you came into us and helped us for that, I'd say that's a pretty important contribution.
Well, it was an ad hoc contribution, so
yeah. But
I'm glad it helped you out, though. That's important to me to know that my modest contribution was so well received by the family, because you know, you're an important part of our lives now, as are some other people that have not done, you know, that didn't survive the war, their families. So
yeah. Yeah, if you could talk a little bit about that. We've been filming and talking about Kenyon, so you've seen the place. You know, you guys being there was great, and if you can talk about that, how you came into our lives and helped us with that, if you want to talk about it, it'd be great.
I could talk about two other survivors that I've helped the families out. Are you
Sure.
interested in that? Okay. In late June of the year 2000, the movable Vietnam Wall came to Rockford, and it's about 10 miles from where I live, where they set it up in a park. And they asked for people to help others find names on the wall. So I volunteered that night, and I went over to the wall to help people. Well, it was a slow night. There wasn't very much action. And so I was getting ready to leave because I thought, well, they can get along without me. They had Vietnam people there that were helping out also. And as I was heading for my car, I saw a couple in motorcycle clothes, Harley Davidson gear, that I thought, well, I'll go over and say hello to them. So I asked them if they needed any help finding a name on the wall. And the man said, no, we're not, we're familiar with the wall. He said, my brother was killed over Laos. And I said, well, I got over 200 missions over Laos. Do you know what part of the country he was in? He said, no, but his name was Jim Herrick. And I immediately said, well, I flew with Jim Herrick the day before he was killed. And the chances of us making a connection in a situation like that are pretty small. But he had been working as a contract engineer for what was at that time Sunstrand Corporation, now part of a bigger corporation. But he was living about 20 miles down the Rock River, and they were very interested in the wall, and so the connection was just amazing. And so I was able to help that family find the location of their brother as much as we could. We still don't know, but Jim George was his flight lead that day, the day that he was killed. And when I was flying with him, actually it was about 40 hours before when I was flying with him. I was an IP in the right seat with a new guy getting checked out on a night mission. And Jim Herrick was the leader on that mission. And so it was kind of one of those situations where, you know, you say, boy, how does this kind of thing happen? But anyway, so I was able to help the Herrick family find their as much information as we could possibly come up with about their brother. And,
well, we had them to our house. The whole family came to our house.
Yeah, and Emily cooked hamburgers for them, and I showed them a lot of my pictures from Laos and from the flight line and that kind of thing. So the other one that I had was on January 10, 1970, I had a long visit with Rick Chorlins, who was one of the pilots in the squadron. And he's the only guy in the squadron that I had a long conversation with, just personal stuff to get to know each other. And I found out he was from St. Louis, and I found out he was an Air Force Academy graduate, and I found out he had a master's degree, which was an unusual sequence. He was really proud of that master's degree. And then he told me about how much he was looking forward to the upcoming R&R he had with his wife in Hawaii. And that night I went out and flew with Rick, and we went over the Ho Chi Minh Trail that night, and we got shot at like we always did over there. But there was nothing that stands out in my mind about that was in that mission. But the next night, he was in the same time slot, and I was going out about 2.5 hours later. And as I was in briefing, the word came back to the command post that Rick had been shot down. And he was in the same airplane I had been in the night before, which is getting pretty close to home as far as I was concerned. And so when he, as we were going out the door then, you know, it's one of those things where you say, well, gee, can't we just take the night off here? We lost one of our friends, one of our pilots, and one of the guys that we know well, and no, you got to go out. We can't spare you. We got to have you out on this mission tonight. So as I was walking out the door, his flight leader, Stu Bischoff, came in, and I said, Stu, what happened out there? He said, I don't really know. I think what happened was that that it probably happened behind Stu, and my speculation is that based upon where the remains have eventually been found, is that he was over close to McGee Pass. I'm just speculating here now, but it's my guess that the enemy had a radar-guided 57 millimeter gun right close on the Vietnam side of the McGee Pass, and they were shooting across because he was right at the border between North Vietnam and Laos. And that's just speculation on my part, but I think that's what happened. So anyway, he was from St. Louis, and so I thought, you know, I know some information about this, what happened to Rick Chorlins, and I ought to try to get a hold of his family and talk to them and let them know what I know about him as much as I can. So I started in St. Louis, and I went to the internet and looked for Chorlins, and I found the only Chorlins I found was in a law firm in St. Louis. And so I called the law firm, and the woman there said, no, there's nobody named Chorlins here, but Mr. Chorlins was one of the founders of the law firm. He's since died, passed away, but his niece is still alive. She had worked here, and now she's not, but I'll get you in contact with her. So I was able to contact the sister. Now, the sister, Toby, was pretty discouraged about talking to me because she had been, scammed, if you will, by people trying to sell monkey bones and tell them that's a real hand there or what have you. And so she wasn't too hot to talk to me, but I finally talked to her and told her I was the real deal. And so Emily and I went to St. Louis to meet her and her family, and had dinner at her daughter's house, and they were very kind, nice people. And by and by, I got a call from her one day. She said, we got a call from the mortuary affairs people from Dover Air Force Base, and they think they have a match with Rick's remains, and the remains are done with a match with the mother. And the mother was still alive at that time. She had dementia, and she wasn't in very good mental condition, but she was still alive, and her DNA was still good. And so she said that the people are coming from Washington, from Dover actually, that are going to come and talk to us and tell us about it. And I want you to come because you can tell us what they're telling us, if it's legit or what have you. Because she still was kind of suspicious, and she didn't know what was truth, and she was willing to trust me. So Emily and I went to St. Louis and met with the mortuary affairs person. And that's a whole nother story that I can go on and on about. But he brought a scientist with him, and the scientist, he said he likes to bring them out to these meetings with the families to let them know that these are real people that they're dealing with, and these are people that need to know the information that you have come up with. And so anyway, we had a good meeting with the mortuary affairs person at Dover, from Dover, in Toby's apartment in St. Louis, and I think I've been a big help to the family. Well, then they had to have a funeral service planned for him, and so Rick had indicated, as we all did, we all were asked if you are shot down and unable to respond and your remains are recovered, where do you want to get buried? Well, he had indicated he wanted to be buried at the Air Force Academy because he was an Academy graduate. And so they set up the funeral at the memorial service, I should say, at the Academy. And the family asked me to speak at the chapel. They were Jews, and so the Jewish chapel at the Academy is on the lower level. And so we went out there and did that, and the chapel was full. And so anyway, I was able to make that contribution also. And one of the things that I told about was that one day, about a few weeks after Rick was shot down, I saw my flight commander walk past the door, my door, with his head down, and he didn't look very good. And I said, "Ron, what's the matter? Something's wrong here." And Ron Marzano was his name. He was a major, and he turned around and he said, the wing commander had just received a letter from Rick Chorlin's mother, and she wants to know what happened, because she said, listen to this, she said, a piece of paper is not much of an exchange for a son. And so I was able to relate that to the group, to the whole congregation that was at the chapel that day. And that was a powerful statement on his mother's part. So anyway, that's the other family that I was able to assist and help find the remains of one of their A-1 pilots. So anyway, that's my story on those things. If you want to hear about my flying experiences with A-1?
I would love to hear. Do you guys want anything else? Are we good there? Do you need something else?
Uh,
Go ahead.
yeah, I was just going to ask, we didn't get a lot of feedback from a lot of people, and a lot of people, it was hard for them. Are you glad you did and stayed involved with people that way? I mean,
I feel a responsibility that I know the information, I know the what happened to them, and they don't. And it's like with you, with your family. You didn't know anything about it until you started nosing around and find out from the mortuary affairs people. But I feel it's my responsibility to do that. And I've told the other guys at other reunions years ago that if you have the resources to dig up somebody, to find them, that you should do that, because the families are very appreciative. I mean, I can't emphasize that enough.
Yeah.
They want to talk to somebody like me, and the other people that I can get them in contact with that help them know what happened, because they have a blank space in their knowledge of what's happened to their family and what's happened to their brother or their son or what have you. And so, yes, to answer, I feel
Yeah,
responsibility for that.
I can't thank you enough for that. That was, I think, a big lesson learned was, why don't you talk to the search and rescue guys, so we could get that information. But it's a different time as well.
Well,
that was the way things were. And
When we had the Herrick family over, it was very interesting. They had no information. There was no information. So Dick brought out all his slides of the base and the family, and there were several brothers and sisters, and they just all sat, and it was like filling in that part of Jim's life that they didn't know about.
Yeah.
It was really important.
And
to them.
you beg for that kind of
Yes.
knowledge that you don't know where to get it if you're not even I was in the military and I still had a hard time.
yeah.
And so to come through, it's cutting to the people, right?
Exactly.
And then, interestingly enough, like I just told you before, where they're honoring POWs and MIAs in Minnesota, and I got a hold of the Herricks and snuck them in.
Yes. That's really cool.
So we got to meet them, and I every time they came to my retirement.
Did they?
Yeah, they came
Cool.
down because I told people, I said, this is why we keep the flag. This is why we do what we do, because there's other families that don't have the answers.
I know.
Yeah.
And
We
the
still don't
snowball
know
of
them.
more people who are willing to help, like you guys, because you're kind of cutting new ground, as a lot of people didn't want to talk about that.
Yeah, Dick was really, I don't know. I felt like God put him there.
So you were a volunteer then as a pilot with SAR missions, and you've continued that same volunteer spirit now, helping inform families. You've never stopped volunteering.
No.
Yeah, I guess you could frame it that way. I don't look at it that way necessarily, but that's
From the heart.
yeah.
Yeah. He just did what he felt like he needed to do at the time. When he met the Herrick family, he felt like we ought to have him over. We ought to show all of our slides and show them what he knew about Jim's life, and he did that. We had him, and it opened up a lot. I'm sure you would have enjoyed that about your dad's life and on the base and what he did and all that. And the same with the Chorlins. They were so appreciative of Dick reaching out to them as a friend of Rick's. And his one sister was really bitter. She was so bitter about how the military would not give him information and whatever. And when that casket came in, and there's, this much in that casket, she just cried. I've never forgotten that. She just cried and cried and cried. And the bitterness, she was able to process all those years of pain and torture and that bitterness. You could just see it go out of her. So it was important.
I watched that happen to my grandma when we came, if you remember her.
Yes.
First time she touched that casket and the flag, it was you could see the
It's a
release.
catharsis.
Yeah. Because she was a stoic Scandinavian. You've seen the type. But a lot of people they think about the wife, they don't think about the mother.
Right.
And you could tell that. That's why I realized that I was glad we had continued trying to do this.
To try to
Yeah, I think my
search.
book has been a contribution to the families too. on
Yeah, it
that.
was.
Because not only you, but I mean with the Herricks and
Yep.
the Jorlins families,
Yeah.
they've gotten so much information from the book of what our missions were like and just what we did on the base there. So
Well, it's an end to their lives through your life, because
Yeah.
your life was very
Yeah.
similar to theirs.
yeah,
Do you? And I would think I thought it was successful what we did in Kenya, because it was not just about my dad, it was about other Vietnam vets, and I felt like.
yeah.
Do you remember that day?
I do.
The memorial service.
Yeah.
Oh, of course, we
Yeah.
sat in the balcony.
Yeah, and you sang.
He sang.
Oh,
he sang in the
oh,
choir.
okay, yeah. The next day we were in the balcony,
Yeah.
but yes, I did sing. You're right.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, there were 2 days of
Yeah.
memorial services there, and the first day I volunteered to sing with the choir.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then when I kept watching people leave the church, I thought, where are they going with it? They wanted to watch the flyover.
Yeah.
And then we got out, all the, what was
Patriot
it?
Guard.
Patriot
Motorcycles.
Guard with all their flags. I've never seen so many flags.
Yeah.
Oh my God. There was like, what, a mile at
200
least?
there. I think they calculated it was about 250.
250.
Flags.
It was unbelievable.
Yeah.
That was really amazing.
Made quite a statement.
Yes. Yes.
There is so much of this kind of thing that is still left over, not only from Vietnam, but from all wars,
Yeah.
that people have blanks in their knowledge of what happened, and it's so important. And that's why what we're doing here today, I think, is important for the recording of oral recording of history and my modest part in it. I didn't do much, but in terms of Boxer 2-2, but I was there and I observed it. And so anyway, I just think this is important to do this, and I appreciate you
I
doing that,
appreciate
and
you,
Brian,
I
you
know they do as
getting
well.
this organized. So thank you for doing
Did
it.
was that any help to you to do things, process your? I don't know. Did you have any troubles after the war, or have any feelings that some of this work was helpful to you? Did you want to talk about that?
I don't know that I have any baggage. My baggage is missing the ones that I flew with. But Rick and the first one was JB East was killed when I had only been there like 2 weeks or so, and I got to know him and got to be friends with him. But he was his remains were recovered probably 20 or 25 years ago, and if I had known about his recovery of his remains and the service, I would have made every effort to attend. It was in San Antonio, but and I have reached out to his family, talked to his widow and his son who lives in New Mexico, but I kind of let it go. I didn't know him well enough to that I should be the contact person. So I don't think I have that much baggage really in this respect. So
He's just pretty much done, I think, what Providence has asked him to do. God asked him to be there when these people were there and to guide him to contact different people, because these people really had no knowledge of what happened, how it happened. and they were really looking for
And where.
answers. And where? All of it. There's just, I
Yeah.
don't know how your mom was, but there was no answers at the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, there were many times that I was out by myself somewhere out in northern Laos, or before that when I was flying F-106 out over the ocean, 100 miles or more over the ocean in a single-engine airplane. And, you know, if you have an engine failure at a time like that, you're not going to be able to, probably won't be able to survive. And it would be a dark place for my parents to try to deal with, and Emily. And so I can see what it's like for the family. I understand what they're dealing with, or try to understand. I can't ever really grasp it because I don't have the resources for that. But you can't.
And the interesting story of the Torlands was how it came about that they had, I don't know how it came about with your father, but with the Torlands, someone had donated, or when they went, you know more of that story. They were in Vietnam, and somebody sold them 4 packages of remains.
Yeah, the remains were discovered by a tourist from the Fort Worth area, some suburb of Fort Worth, in Cameron Bay. Now, Cameron Bay from Mugia Pass is about 300 miles, and how they got from Mugia Pass down to Cameron Bay is anybody's guess. But this tourist got these 4 plastic bags of remains. He bought them for whatever he paid. I don't know. Might have been $25 or $30 or whatever. And when he got back to the States, he mailed them to the people at Dover, the mortuary affairs people at Dover. And they didn't know what to do with them. They didn't have the resources. This was around the year 2000 or so,
yeah.
somewhere around in there.
2003.
And they didn't know what to do with them, so they sent them to the mortuary affairs people in Hawaii. And the only thing they could tell them was that these are human remains, but we can't really identify them at this time. Well, the science of DNA improved over the years, little by little, and by and by they were able to make a match with the families. And so I don't know what happened to the other families, but
Mother had an unusual DNA marker that they were able to trace that marker with her.
There weren't a whole lot of Jewish people
Right.
in Laos
Right.
or Vietnam at the time, and
Right.
those are markers that actually are significant
Yeah.
because when you start going back through the strands of DNA, they're direct ties.
And the way they test them, they said they had a piece about like that, and it almost destroyed the whole thing because you have to send it to 2 different laboratories for the testing. And so by the time, what was left was probably that much.
It has to be from the right area, the right part of the body. It has to be in the right condition. There are a lot of things that come into play
I don't
with that.
understand, but I just knew there wasn't much left of him that they were able to identify.
the important thing about that is that the family accepted the remains as they were presented. They didn't, of course, open a casket. They just accepted what was received as genuine, and that was a major relief to the family.
Yeah.
Now, the problem is the Herrick family has not had that experience yet.
Yep.
And we're hoping that they will, but boy, from Jim George's description, Jim George was his flight leader that day, and it could be anywhere up in that area there. And you get in the jungle, and the jungle's going to take over.
Yeah.
And the hills and the mountains up in there, in northern Laos, east of the PDJ, and east of Ban Ban Valley, and along Route 7 there, it's just going to be very difficult for them to find anything because there's just no way of knowing where he went in.
Yes.
Go right ahead.
What were you going?
Oh, no, I was seeing if you need.
On the lighter side, we talk about this a little bit. Do you miss, for a now retired guy, do you still miss the flying? Does that ever go away?
Sure, I miss flying. I miss flying, and I miss the camaraderie of the guys, and I miss the action.
Yeah.
But I don't miss 3 hours sit around in Dallas waiting for the next flight to come, and I don't miss the alarm going off at 4 o'clock in the morning. Get up and go to work, and I don't miss the phone call telling me that something's changed and I got to do this instead of that. So there are things that I do miss, yes, and things that I don't miss. So it's a mixed bag.
Are you glad you served?
Oh yeah, yeah. It was sure. It was a major part of my life. But for me, it was all fun. To go to pilot training, that was fun. I just had a blast. It came easy to me. And one of the guys in the class was not doing very well in the class. And he said, I see you're not studying this stuff. How come you can not study this stuff and do so well? And I said, well, it's the same stuff I had in ROTC. The weather course and the navigation course were the same courses that I had in ROTC. So I already had those courses. I didn't have to do any studying. I just went to class and took the tests and did well on them.
But then you had to fly.
Yeah, well, that you either have the.
See, that was the easy part.
Yeah, for some it is.
Yeah.
Well, it is. Some people can play baseball, some people can play basketball. I can fly.
Yeah.
And that was my gift, I guess you could say that. And so that's the reason I finished high enough in my class to get an F-106 assignment. And that was one of the high points of my life, was to get an F-106 assignment out of pilot training. And I really enjoyed flying that airplane. I didn't want to go to war. I didn't want to fly the A-1, but the Air Force needed fighter pilots to go to war, and so they knew where to get them. So they got them from Air Defense Command, and there were a lot of other ADC pilots that were there when I was there, like Pete Williams, and Jim Monk, and on, Air Defense Command pilots that were flying an A-1, because that's where you go get pilots. When you need fighter pilots, you go to a fighter squadron. So, that worked out pretty well. But I would have much rather stayed in the F-106, but I wouldn't be here today if I had, because it opened up a new world to me to fly the A-1. So
You happy about that still?
Oh, sure, but I would not. I could have gone along without getting shot at, or going out at 4 o'clock in the morning or 2 o'clock in the morning or whatever, and doing all the things that we did out there, and then losing all the friends that I lost. I have regrets about that, but they would have been just as dead anyway, whether I was there or not. So.
But you told me when you would take them up and. You were instructor pilot. The most important thing you did was tell them and make them be safe.
Yeah.
Yeah. You wanted them.
Well, that's what you always have to do.
Program in their mind that you wanted them to come back.
Yeah. Yeah, you got to be safe. That's for sure, and that's the first thing about flying airplanes. The first thing is to fly the airplane. If you have an emergency procedure or emergency happens, fly the airplane, then deal with the emergency, whatever it is. But you got to fly the airplane first, and that's what you got to drill into people. So there's a lot of knowledge here in this reunion of people that I don't have to tell them that; they all know that. But there are a lot of people here who have a lot of experience and a lot of knowledge on how airplanes work and how do you use an airplane as a weapon of war, and that's what you need.
So I want to say thank you so much. Thank you so much for spending the time with us and sharing your story. Really, really appreciate it. And if there's anything we can ever do for you, just feel free to reach out.
It's my pleasure. I keep telling the guys over and over, write your story down. Tell your story, because when you're gone, nobody's going to do it for you. And that's why I wrote my book. I spent a lot of hours on that book, and finally got it written. And that's an important contribution, I think, to the history of the war, because Nobody's written about the night mission over Laos before. And the name of the book is Firefly. And it's a Skyraider story about America's secret war over Laos. And I didn't put in there at night, but that's what the book is all about because I specialize in night flying. I figured if they can't see me, they can't shoot me. And it worked.
Nowadays, they could shoot you at night.
It worked.
Well, fantastic. And thank you for braving the heat in here. I apologize for that, but when this is on, there's so much noise, it just kills the audio. So,
Okay.
Well,
thank you so
You're
much.
welcome.
Thanks.
so much.